Hey guys, so as always I wanted to bring another tier list by the data video, but this time focusing only on rogue decks. Now the formula to calculate the tier score is laid out here, and you can check out my old videos on how this score is calculated in more detail. If you paid attention to my last meta tier list video, you'll know that I had to modify the formula a little bit and use representation from the last YCS top cut as part of the score, and this is still based on YCS Hartford, which is a couple weeks old now, but the format hasn't changed too much since then. The way the rogue decks will be categorized has not changed either, and we'll be categorizing them as A to D. Now this was what the overall meta tier list looked like in the video I posted a couple of weeks ago that you can check out. So basically for this video, we won't be including any decks that are listed as tier 1 or 2 here. I would say some may argue that Salamangreat and at Ignister are still rogue, but they actually did show some Nat successes, so I'm going to consider them as tier 2 as well. As for limitations with YGeoScope, the site still doesn't seem to identify Evil Twin, so sadly this deck will not be part of this video. Phantom Knights get categorized as Burning Abyss on YGeoScope, so for the purpose of this video, I treated all Burning Abyss decks on YGeoScope as Phantom Knight, which means that we are probably adding in a little bit of actual Burning Abyss control. So let's start with the actual tier list. The rogue deck with the highest score was Tri-Brigade. So this deck has shown some popularity lately, and Revolt is pretty dang good, and while the branded version seems to have died after Anaconda got banned, really don't sleep on this deck, it's got a good grind game. Coming in at second is Virtual World, which can play the Brave Engine, but it does make the deck brickier than it already is. Shen Shen as a walking Macrocosmos is a pretty good thing to have, and with DPE mostly gone in the format, that allows Virtual World to do at least a little bit better. After that we have Heroes. Now previously I didn't include this deck because so many decks that played the DPE engine would get mistakenly categorized as just Hero on YGeoScope a lot. But now that almost all non-hero decks aren't running DPE, I think it may be safe to assume that these values are actually mostly for pure heroes. Their win percentage at 47% wasn't so hot, but it's a great rogue combo option where Fusion Destiny does a whole lot more for this deck than it did for any non-hero decks bringing out DPE, and Darklaw is just a better version of Shen Shen and just causes a lot of issues for many decks. After that we have DDD, which did top YCS Hartford, a big brain deck that provides a unique board presence with some negations and monster stealing, and DDD Griffin really improved this deck and it has a very versatile game. Starting with B tier, we have Dogmatika Invoke. Now with the release of branded stuff, I do personally think that this deck is tier 2, but at least by the Dueling Book data, didn't seem so for this month. Obviously consistent and grindy, but can be a little subpar in many cases. I did recently finish 13th at Waterloo Regionals with branded Dogmatika Invoked Eldritch, so make sure to check out my deck profile and combo video that I'll link below. Next we have the dreaded Mystic Mind Burn, which actually won over half of their matches in the last 7 days. Crazy that people are actually playing this deck. It's just so terrible to go up against, and really the goal of the strategy is for players to not have fun. And then we have the good old Dinos, which is certainly a fan favorite deck, but I don't think it will escape rogue stats for a while. The good news is that most decks aren't running Lancey anymore, so at least Dinos have that going for them. After that we have another reliable deck in Altergeist, which continues to be one of the most consistent rogue decks. Impermanent Faker combo is just deadly, and once you let this deck gain advantage, it's going to be really hard for you to come back, and then playing Secret Village of Spellcasters to lock you out of spells is just game in most instances. Next we have Phantom Knight, which did fall off hard because of the ban of Anaconda, as they relied heavily on DPE and relied on Dragoon before that. Still a good deck, but is another strategy known for its brickiness. Fogblades are pretty dang good though and easily accessible in this deck, and the deck can do a lot of damage as well. Then we have Nishina Infinite Track, or Earth Machines, however you want to call them, had a pretty good match win percentage at 56%, and Citadel is a pretty cool boss monster that can work well under skill drain. The deck has a good grind game, but it can also deal a lot of damage as well. At C tier we have Plunder Patrol, which is another deck that utilizes the Brave Engine well, can tag out to be equipped to their ship extra deck monsters that can serve as negates. The deck has a really cool gimmick and has done well in tournaments here and there. After that we have Pendulum Magicians, which had a pretty bad match win percentage at 40%. With Beyond the Pendulum release, as well as the recent ban list working in their favor, it's certainly a lot more popular than before. I did play Pens myself a few years ago and loved that strategy, but I did find that it was a bit too die roll dependent then, and I'm not sure if it's any better now. Then we have True Draco, where they got more Dynamite Knight based on the recent ban list, but I'm surprised enough people are still running this deck. I played this deck myself when I first started playing competitively, and it's just nowhere as consistent as before, where we used to have 3 Card of Demise and 3 Dragonic Diagram, not to mention now there's Lightning Storm and Feathers Duster to deal with in this format. Next we have Orcus, which was a really cool archetype in terms of art and gimmick, had a pretty decent win percentage as well, and while Harpor is still banned, looks like the deck has some gas in the tank. At least they have Babel, which is one heck of a field spell. After that we have Mech Knights, which has been a strong rogue choice for a while now and has really changed how we play the game in terms of how we want to arrange our cards in the same column. Despite being a going second deck, has a lot of control components in its strategy and is a really cool deck to play. Then we have Agents, which, to be completely honest with you, I have no idea about this deck, so there's not really much I can commentate on it. I think it got resurgence lately based on the cards from Ghost set that came out recently, and the fact that many players are trying this deck out is pretty cool. Next we have Mathmech, which always has a couple players on Dueling Book who get really high rankings with this deck. Had a great win percentage at 60% among all players in the last 7 days as well, although based on a small sample size. The deck is getting a new card soon that will possibly help this deck become tier 1. Finally, for the C tier, we have Trickstar. My good friend actually played this at Waterloo Regionals, and it's funny to see this deck come back after Light Stage coming back to 2 on the recent ban list. Had a pretty awful win percentage at 35% though, and while Droll Reincarnation combo to rip every card out of your opponent's hand is nice, I guess they don't have too much outside of that. Finally, we have the D tier, and we are starting it with Lightsworn. Such an iconic deck, especially Judgment Dragon as its boss monster, which long time ago was once a tier 1 strategy. Right now, not the greatest deck and at a pretty bad win percentage at 37%. Doesn't have much modern support, but I think because it is a fan favorite deck, I don't think it'd be surprising to see additional cards be added in the near future, like how they're boosting up Blackwing soon. The last deck on the tier list is Monarchs, which had an absolute miserable match win percentage at 25%. I actually played this deck myself as well when I first started, and the deck is nice for new players because it's very easy to learn and it's very cheap. However, this deck is quite fragile as many hand traps in the game affect its core strategy, but Pantheism at 3 is just so crazy sometimes and might make it worthwhile for Monarch players. Alright guys, so that was it for another Rogue tier list by the data video. Hope you enjoyed that and hope it helped you figure out what Rogue decks you want to play next. As always, a big thanks to all my Patreons for their support, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, then consider subscribing for more database Yu-Gi-Oh content, and well, take care guys.